Hi guys, my name is Haneen. I'm a sex and intimacy coach, and today I want to talk to us about how to have difficult conversations with our partners or people we're just starting to date for the first time. We can't change anything unless we proactively mention it, maybe even schedule it. In busy long-term relationships, sometimes it's hard to find the time to prioritize these conversations, but nothing changes in your rapport and your dynamic unless you do that. I think the first thing is to reframe this idea that conflict is a bad thing. To me, conflict is the gateway to intimacy. I gather way more information in the space of conflict than I do in months of easy, effortless relating. And I wouldn't bother to bring something up with somebody unless I really loved them and I wanted to invest in it. Think about it. Why would I bother to give somebody feedback into my inner world and how I perceive them unless I wanted to continue having a relationship with them? The problem comes when we get a little bit enmeshed and we start to blame and we shame, and that can come about for a variety of reasons. The thing I want to give you today is a solid template for bringing up these conversations effortlessly. So to start with, we want to have some kind of pre-framing. So let's say I, as a speaker, want to bring up an issue with my partner. The first thing I would do is to ask if your partner is in place to actually hear you. Why is this important? Because if we are hungry, angry, lonely, tired, irritable, drunk, any of these things, our ability to lean into conflict, to stay curious, to be creative, to problem solve is completely offline. Our nervous systems are just kind of on a precipice of fight and flight. So if there are any of those things, and a great way to remember is the abbreviation of HALT, H-A-L-T, stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired, then it's not a good time to have the conversation. So, hey love, are you in a place to hear me right now? I'd love to have a conversation with you about our sex life or something of that kind. Let's assume they say yes. Or if they say no, they might say no, but I'd be happy to have a conversation on our walk tomorrow morning. The second thing is to then name any fears or emotions that you have in this present moment that you feel like sharing, if it's applicable. So it might be something like, I notice I feel quite nervous bringing this up, and I have a story that if I share this, it'll feel like too much, and I think I just needed to name that to feel heard. This is also an opportunity for you to add any requirements that you have around how you'd like the space to be held. So for example, I'd love it to have your full presence, or I'd love to name this space to be judgment free, or I notice I'm quite nervous. If you notice that I'm speaking too fast, I'm wondering if you just put a hand on my heart, or something like that. So something that would help basically make the space safer for you. And if the speaker doesn't do that for themselves, the listener could say, hey, what can I do to help make this feel safer for you to share? That's also a beautiful line. So we have two things so far. Are you in a place to hear me? Naming any vulnerabilities you have around sharing. Number 3 would be, what is the goal of your sharing? So why are you sharing this with the listener? Is it to be shared, heard, or seen? Is it to be celebrated, to be praised, to be supported, to be reassured, something like that? Is it to have a problem solved, so some advice? Firstly, it's a great exercise as the speaker to identify what that is, right? To actually be able to say, you know what, I don't think I need you to actually problem solve this. I would just like to be heard. And that way the listener can kind of listen with that ear. Number 4, before you even start to talk about this heavy material, is to share something that you really love. I really adore this relationship. I care about it, which is why I'm choosing to bring this up with you. Or it could be something like, I absolutely love the way that we make so much time for each other. I cherish it so much, and I'm so appreciative of your time and wanting to understand me better, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. Starting on a positive note means that when you launch into the thing that you want to raise, they're not going to get defensive. That beautiful pre-framing has given you the safety to bring up the tough stuff. If you were to launch straight in there like, really had it now with the dishes or the way that we've been handling finances, of course you're not going to get a good response. So that would be the pre-framing, right? To have an effective, difficult conversation. Then when you go into the speaking section, I would make sure you're always speaking from the I, right? What your experience is, as opposed to saying, you're doing this, you're doing this. It could be something like, I notice that when I come home from work, I really need my space, and I would really appreciate if I could actually have some time in the living room to myself to do these things, or whatever it is, rather than being like, you're always in the living room taking up space and blah, blah, blah. So being able to bring it back to you is important, plus being specific, right? Rather than generalizing, we're actually bringing up specific examples of when your needs were not met. And at the end of it, you might want to make a request, right? So then it might be bringing yourself back to the initial goal of communication, which is, I'd love to know how this lands for you, or I'd love to, going forward, love to make a request. You and I are having chats every week about this, or that you do the dishes on this day, or I would love you to compliment me more, or whatever that request is. Finish it with, do you mind reflecting what I've said so that I know if I've made myself clear? Or do you mind sharing back what you heard so that I know that I've made sense? This is so crucial. It is so interesting how many times people say something and the other person is hearing something completely different. So this might sound like a really simple thing and redundant perhaps, but actually most of the time we get into arguments because we're not arguing about the same thing, right? So being able to repeat, the listener is able to then empathize and make sure they've got it correct.